Welcome to the first session at the iREP International Documentary Film Festival 2025. We're having 3 days of workshops, online workshops on book-to-screen adaptations. So my name is Oyin Talabi. I am a producer and also but more of a project manager, and I work with Koramo. So for those of you that do not know, Koramo is a media house. We publish books and we also produce documentaries. We've done Journey of an African Colony, which is screening on Netflix. That's a shameless plug right there. And I would like, so I invite you to go watch that. We've also done Loot and the Lost Kingdoms, which was screened at iREP last year. I believe that it was the opening film for last year's festival. And the interesting thing about those two books or those two films was that they were books. So they were both book-to-screen adaptations. And so I'm also now the director of the Koramo Creative Lab, which is something that we started end of last year. We're in the process of it. And guess what the theme of that is? Book-to-screen adaptations. And that was something that was greatly inspired by our guest today, should I say, or the person that we're going to be our facilitator today, our teacher today, Mr. Femi Odugbemi. It was greatly inspired by him. I remember he had come to the Koramo Festival of Words, which is an annual festival that we have. And he had moderated a session, or he had facilitated a session on book-to-screen adaptations. And so I ran into him at the Durban Film Festival last year, and I was telling him about this film lab that we are focusing on something that we believe, or it's the way that we believe that we will get deeper stories in not just in Nigeria, across board. It's a deep way, it's a great way of getting deep stories. So I'm really stoked to have been invited to moderate this. Somewhat different, as much as it's a workshop, so interview, so of book-to-screen adaptations, where I am leading a team of a creative team through the book-to-screen process. No, I am not teaching any of the classes, but we have teams. We have a script lab, we have a production lab, and then a post-production. And so we have a script lab ongoing right now. Some of our writers are in the house. And so because I'm also venturing into that space, I feel stoked to be having this conversation with Mr. Femi Odugbemi, who is so passionate about book-to-screen adaptations. And our theme, or our core focus today, is The Man Died, which is a book-to-screen adaptation of Wole Soyinka's book, The Man Died. So enough about all my rambling. I'm going to do a quick introduction of FO, as we fondly call him, and then we shall go into the conversation. Before I do that, I want you to note, as I was explaining about the format, I want you to think of it as a three-way conversation. So I'm going to, at each section, I will invite you to share your questions in the chat, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of FO. Femi Odugbemi is a respected filmmaker. He's a writer and a content producer. He's also the founder and CEO of Zuri 24 Media House. He's a voting member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and a member of the International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. That's the Emmys. Femi co-founded the iREP International Documentary Film Festival and has served as the Academy Director of MultiChoice Talent Factory West Africa from 2018 to 2022. He's been nurturing the next generation of African filmmakers with a rich portfolio of acclaimed TV dramas such as Battleground, Brethren, Covenant, and feature films like Giddy Blues and the recently produced adaptation of Wole Soyinka's The Man Died. Mr. Femi's body of work showcases the diversity and richness of contemporary African experiences. So we're going to show you a short clip now that would have the trailer and a little other information, and then we'll dive in.
Which bag? This one?
No, I was just jogging.
Only a fool will settle for enough when they can have more.
For the first time in Nigeria's history, the elites were trapped.
We have the right to speak. Let your voice not be silent. What because I was okay.
We will get a crackdown on the gang. Fall back! Fall back! And you both will find sleep no more. Get the police swap in the worker security. We go kidnap her pikin. Ask for ransom. Once she pay the ransom, we jack her from this country.
The group that I represent, all we want for you to do is to call a halt to the fire. The urgent question is, who shook the bloody jar?
When was the last time you saw Ajuku?
The group that I represent, all we want for you to do is to call a halt to the fire.
We will not allow him to destabilize our nation.
Yes, sir.
The regime wants him silenced with nothing traced to us.
But that will require placing a hold on secession.
Yes.
And that is the sticky point, Wale.
The Igbos were nothing but an excuse for the military and the mafia to not do the actual work of nation building. And that, my friend, is carrying out the aims of January 15.
You should be in class teaching. Why are you always disturbing the peace of the land? The last time you held up a radio station with a gun.
Stop that thing.
Now you are in bed with Ojuku. Why?
I think we need a group of new entrants into this war, so that we can neutralize the two combatants.
Absolutely. A third force that will work in terms of a compromise for the people.
Wally, speak all the grammar you want, but this is not the way to go about it.
So what will you have me do, Bola? I have a message that could end this war and bring about peace.
Supporting the Igbos against this nation does not look like a decision an intelligent Yoruba man like you should make.
Because when a people have been subjected to a degree of inhuman violation, for which there's no other word but genocide, I believe very strongly that they have a right to seek an identity apart from their aggressors. You know, when I see you fighting each other, and then the warders fighting you and you fighting each other, you know what I see? I see this nation. Have you heard the story about the red ants and the black ants in the jar? You know, they're all going about their business, you know, doing their thing, until someone shakes the jar. And then the ants, they start to fight each other. Now, why the red and black ants are fighting is a secondary issue. The urgent question is, who shook the bloody jar?
I'm hoping that a number of you have seen the film. I've had the privilege of watching it twice. We screened it at Koramo Festival last year, and we had a huge audience, so a huge attendance for that. And I do know that it has screened in quite a number of countries. The Africa House in London, Johannesburg, in South Africa, America, Tunisia, and Egypt. So it's still making the rounds, and if you haven't seen it, I'm sure that you will get the opportunity to see it. Efo, are you in the house? I know you're in the house, but can we see your face, please? Hello, Efo.
Good morning, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Yes.
How are you? I'm
Thank
excited.
You.
iREP always excites me, so it's a great way to start. Yeah.
It is. I'm really stoked to be having this conversation with you. Not as stoked to have such a huge audience, so I'm a little nervous about that. So forgive me, people, if I bite my tongue. But I'm happy to be having this conversation. Also, like I said earlier, because we've started this creative lab at Koramo. I remember our conversation at Durban when you were like, I hope that is a book to screen adaptation. No, it wasn't necessarily that before that conversation, but after that conversation, it became that. And we've started that journey. We are in the middle of our script lab. Some of our writers are in the house. And so we've also, this conversation is personal to me as well. And so I'm really happy about that. And it's personal to Koramo because Koramo is, we publish books and then we're producing them. So book to screen really is a thing. Jumping right in, like book to screens adaptations are notoriously difficult to pull off. As in, by the time, many times the audience will go in, you've read the book, you're really excited about a movie coming out about it. You go in, and then sometimes you are elated. Some like Lord of the Rings left a lot of the people that read the books and then seen the film. They were really elated about how the visual representation. But then there are some that, you go in and you see, no, the book was better, that this film didn't quite make it. So it's difficult because by the time you have to, take that imagination and put it on the screen, a lot can get lost. And I remember something that you had said at the Q Fest, which is adapting literature into film is a complex creative process that involves balancing the essence of the source material with the unique storytelling capabilities of film. This is a direct quote from you. And so today, this morning, I'm hoping that we can unpack that process and you can tell us a bit more about how you brought The Man Died to screen so that many filmmakers, and when I say filmmakers, many creatives, because we have writers in the room, we have producers in the room, we have directors, cinematographers, so that everybody can learn from your insights and your experience. So like I've shared, everyone, my questions are broken into sections, and I encourage you to put your questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of each section. We'll see whatever questions you have. This is a three-way conversation, even though I'm the one with the mic. I will be your mouthpiece. And also, please share your questions with us. So I'm going to start, Efo, with understanding the source material. So deeply understanding a book is key to any adaptation, as one would imagine. So can you talk us through how you and your team approached analyzing The Man Died? What were the core themes, the emotion, the historical elements that you identified that you thought was essential to preserve?
Well, thank you very much, Oyin. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that has come to be a part of this conversation. I'm amused myself by the design of this because, I have taught this class before, but you guys are asking me to drop my PowerPoint and just try to, to bring my ideas alive as conversations. And I find that to be interesting. That's what makes all the young people of iREP, those are the beautiful ideas that that they bring to help us old fogies align with the times. But thank you very much. I'm going to try my best. I think, first of all, it's important to kind of talk about why I'm so excited and why I push literature to film as the next big space for us as an industry, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. I talked about this at the Johannesburg Film Festival just last week. I think, we've got to figure out a way where the creative economy actually connects with each other so that we don't have single streams of income on individual retail projects. I think that's very important because one of the things that adaptation to books does is that it allows us to tap into a pre-existing story, expand the economy of that from the written word, be able to pay the originators of that story the kind of residuals and licensing fees that goes beyond their selling their books. We're able to bring a different set of expertise in film because a book writer is not a screenwriter. So you need that book writer to work with a screenwriter so that this story jumps from the page and begins to be reimagined in a way that takes it from one strain of the creative economy to a second and bigger strain of the creative economy. But what's great about that is we pull everybody along. The book already has an audience. The book already has impact. The story in the book already sometimes has already been adapted into maybe children's literature or into television, sometimes in some other spaces. So for me, it's a wonderful way to expand the creative economy. Film, of course, is the space where all artistic instincts tend to meet. I mean, film accommodates everything. It accommodates the writer, the fashion designer, the photographer, the cinematographer, the singer, the musician, everything, the performer. Film is where everything comes together. And so to connect the book to film expands exponentially the possibilities of everyone within the industry, within the creative economy, to benefit from one story. And for me, the second thing is our literature is like a wonderful mine of incredible gold. I mean, our writers in literature, whether it be poetry, some of the sort of like books of people like Dio Fagnoa that we've not been able to access. Things Fall Apart, all these really old texts that in the 60s and 70s were really the mainstay of storytelling in Nigeria. We're bringing them to meet a new audience. We're bringing them to be reinterpreted, to be reimagined. We're bringing them to collide in the context of their story, in the context of their time and period, to collide with accumulated knowledge that we now have that we didn't have back then. But more than anything else, we are preserving these works in a way that I think would help them to last longer for posterity. We're also bringing the names and the authors and the creatives from generations and introducing them to this generation of creatives. For me, there's just a lot there that I think allows us to do more, to be more, to earn more. But what is clear to me is that it requires a specific set of skills that we have to learn. And the first thing again is, the question you ask is all books ready? in their published state?
Yeah.
Are they already to be made as film? My answer to that would be not really.
Okay.
Often, to select the book, I think first and foremost, you have to find a book, whether it's fiction, faction, or memoir. In our case, The Man Died is a memoir, so it's actually real life events. But there are books that have been turned. I mean, The Godfather was fiction, and The Godfather remains today. The film of it redefined the impressions of those who read the book. The audience that came to the film redefined how America saw the Italian culture. The film, redefined even how people saw those you could call the mafia men. So there is a way in which selecting the text itself is so critical. So you have to have a book that you found not only to be entertaining, but to be significant. Significant in terms of impact, significant in terms of context, significant in its characterization. The question I asked someone last week, would The Man Died have done so well even if Wole Soyinka was not the protagonist?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. So the question then is, in selecting The Man Died, one of the things that was very clear was that the book itself gave us an insight into a period of history, one that I think we've often tried to avoid. The book itself took us into, what shall I say, the lead up to a lot of the pain and anguish that has characterized, ethnic relations in Nigeria. The book itself sort of informed us that ethnicism didn't just start today, and that in its extreme, it can lead to some incredibly bad consequences, the war being one of those. The book gave us the model of a creative who thought himself a public intellectual enough to want to actually intervene to stop a war. His humanism was not just articulated in poems and books and writings. He lived it. He actually thought he could go in, talk to Gowan, talk to Ojukwu, and make them see sense. Those are very critical bits of the book that qualify it for the story, for us selecting it. But more than that, the timing of the making of that book was critical. Wole Soyinka had become topical in the year of the election. There were a lot of people who had opinions about who he is, what he is, had he been bribed, had he not been bribed. People try actually almost diminish and demean his accomplishments because he was not supporting whoever they were supporting. And it was important for us, I think, timing-wise, to also select this book for this adaptation because it was timely. It was an introduction to a new generation of who the protagonist, this character, is. And I think when we took the film to Enugu, for instance, it was very surprising for a lot of young people in Enugu to realize that, yes, Soyinka had actually gone to prison because he was trying to stop the war against Biafra. And I think that gave them a different impression of who he is and the choices he has made over time. So I do think that, one, you have to know the text, but you have to also understand the significance of it. I think that the book you choose has to have profound themes, themes that in many ways can become conversation starters. The books that most people remember the most, the texts people remember the most, are the texts that they have found provocative in some form, they are texts that have sort of advanced ideas that people have had to engage with. They have had characters that people can relate with. They have had protagonists that, you know, a lot of the design of that character as for them being in some form fascinating. But more than anything else is what the conflicts are. The kind of challenges and difficulties that the characters face, I think also have to be monumental. As I say to folks, film only works when the antagonist is as powerful or even more powerful than the protagonist. The truth of the matter is the story of David and Goliath would never have made it into the Bible if David was just as powerful as Goliath. It would just have been two fighting. And so it's important in picking the book that you know you find the theme, the message, the characters, the context, the period as well. But essentially a profound story, a profound characterization, insights that you think are deep enough to become conversation starters. Yeah. But also you have to look at the book from the perspective of how it has impacted the audience. Because essentially, when all is said and done, adaptation rolls over an audience, rolls over people who are passionate already about the story. Yeah. And in that rollover, you have to kind of know what the expectations are. Because one of the negatives of adaptation is that people have preconceived ideas of what the character looks like. They have preconceived ideas of what the context is, when they describe a house. Because in a book, books are about individual readers' imagination. When I read about a house, I can only think of it in terms of the houses that I've lived in or the ones that I've seen. Other people have different images in their head. But when you then try to make that into a film, you've got to figure out a house that you think serves the film, not just the story. Mm-hmm. Because again, you have to understand in adaptation, you have to ask yourself, yes, this is the audience expectation, but does this book, this story lend itself to film? I said before when I came to Koramo that it's not a translation. No, an adaptation is an artistic creation. It's a reimagination. It has to serve the film format, which means that you have to figure out how to make the written word into images and pictures that are larger than life. It has to have, I mean, the emotional beats of the story are really what you are looking to expand in film. And for me, what is most critical is to separate a written word, which can sometimes appeal to the intelligence. You have to translate it to film, which is an experience, which has to be written so that it has emotional impact. So while you read a book, you have to feel the film. You have to be able to have in it those elements of emotional connection that makes good cinema. Laughter, even fear, suspense, the capacity to see drama, to look at, you know, the story crescendo, you know, so that you actually have cliffhangers and you're able to actually constantly be surprised in the 3 acts of the film. There are many books that in selecting books, you have to understand that there are many books that people skip chapters because they figure they already know what's going to happen. Those are usually not books that lend themselves to film. So in terms, I hope that's a very long answer to a short question, but if you're picking up, if you're selecting, and I think that's really where the first level of care has to be, what stories do you think translate filmically? You can call it, you know, visual re-engineering, imagination re-engineering, but I think the producer's work, first and foremost, is to tick the box of can this translate great? Does it have all the emotional touch points that the audience require in film? Secondly, the protagonist, is the protagonist three-dimensional? Is the protagonist male or female? Interesting enough. And then where is this protagonist over time? Does the audience like the protagonist? Does the audience hate the protagonist? It's very important. And of course, what is the demography of the audience? The people that have loved the book, what is their understanding of that story? What is their expectation of that story? And how does this story, when taken to film, how is it expanded? How is it bigger? Will it make it travel? Because now it's an experience. It's an intellectual exercise. Now you have music, you have a music score to sort of steer our experience of the story. Now you have opportunity as well to take what might be minor characters in the book and make them bigger in the film. You can actually entirely delete characters because you're reimagining. You get to pick which parts of this book are movements that tie well together. One of the things that also made The Man Died very interesting to us, and I have to say that, you know, it takes a bravery to a lot of folks did not finish reading The Man Died, because in many ways, you know, the way that Professor Wole Soyinka writes, you really truly have to be committed to finishing the book, because sometimes access, if you're just looking for entertainment, yes, you might not finish the book. But in there lurks what I think are many, many themes that sort of espouse his humanity, his capacity to be able to stay for 22 months in the community of his own head. And what were the tools that he needed to have to confront government, to confront people who really had no problem eliminating him. He actually was never expected to come out of prison. But for him, even within that, to actually be able to stay within his own head, remain generally sane, avoid things that might have actually damaged or diminished him, and still have enough fortitude to reject inducements for him to recant. That capacity, to me, you really have to see it in the book for you to understand why it was important that that was the film. And for me, what we were trying to do is to showcase what an artist can do. An artist is a very powerful, it's a powerful, embodiment of many things. Strength is one of them. Fortitude is one of them. The capacity to understand beyond the now, beyond the news, beyond the social media, the capacity to insist on what is right and wrong. I mean, the artist is our guide, is our public intellectual. The place of the artist is incredibly, is deep and profound. And almost all governments, especially tyrants, keep a close eye on artists because the subliminalities of our expressions move people. So the first lesson we thought was important to transmit, because now we have a large army of young artists, young creators, young writers, young filmmakers. It's a blessing that I don't think Nigeria quite understands yet. And for us right now, it's important that not just to build their craft, but to build their minds, to build their sense of self, for them to understand that the artists that came before them understood their place and the weight of their work. And that in that journey, there might be dangers, but the capacity to use our work, whether it be art or even fashion, it's film, it's books, whatever it is, to have an audience listening to us is a blessing. And it cannot just be entertainment. There has to be a way in which we begin to actually intervene and espouse what I think ideas that can move our country and our community forward. And I think right now we have a lot of very skillful and craft-ready artists, but not a lot of conscious artists. A lot of them think of this only commercially, of their skills only commercially, and think of their skills only from the perspective of gathering followers and audiences. And then all of that is good. But all of that also gives you power to change minds, to change the world, to speak to specific issues, and to become, a profound voice. That to me is also why it was important to showcase the Wole Soyinka story. But of course, it was his 90th birthday. So in the end, it was also an important salute, I think, to a very important artist who has inspired just millions and millions of us.
Thank you for that, sir. And you have covered a few questions that I had. However, Hadiza has also shared a question that was also my next question. So I'm going to read Hadiza's question, which is, how do you balance the creative imagination of a book with staying true to the book? Because you said that, we have to reimagine it. So how do we then stay true to the book? Are we obligated to stay true to the book? And then to what extent? And also, what was this a consideration for a book from an author as profound as Prof. Soyinka?
Okay, I would say it's a beautiful question, because it's a question that I think most people wrestle with when they want to do an adaptation. And for me, I had an intellectual view of it, but then through the making of this film and through getting advice from those who've done this before, it was really eye-opening for me, because what can be the death of an adaptation is when you have the author of the book and the producer not on the same page. And that's why I kept saying when I came around, it's not a formal transition of book. It's two different formats. It's very different. How do you balance the idea? You are shackled by the expectations of both the author and the readers, those who have read the book. Yeah. If you look at a good example for the balance of that would be The Godfather, the opening scene of The Godfather. I think I played it back at Kuramo. I wish I had it here. It would have been wonderful. That opening scene is not the opening of the book. The opening of the book takes almost 4 pages to get to the opening scene. The baker, and if you remember the film, in the opening scene, it's a single shot that starts off from the face of the baker whose daughter has been raped or beaten up by some street boys. The baker is speaking. The camera is just a slow zoom out for almost 2 minutes of that scene. And in the zoom out, you go from the baker who needs justice to showing the Godfather on his seat, or quote unquote, a throne, to showing those around him who he uses like his government, to showing the fact that there is a wedding going on behind him. Essentially, one pull-out in the opening scene of The Godfather covers almost 2 chapters. And that, to me, is how film can become incredibly efficient, because the things that a book needs to describe, a film can show. And because a film can show it, it can show it quickly by combining it with several different things. So for me, I think the first thing in sort of balancing fidelity and creative liberty is to decide what must stay intact and what can change. The essence of the story must not change. The essence of the story is understanding what the theme is, understanding what the emotional, arcs are, understanding whose story is this, the lead, the character whose story this is, and understanding what the range of challenges and conflicts are. Everything else, in terms of building the world, in terms of the context of each, whether it's inciting incident and all of that, you can actually take some creative liberty because film demands it. Film needs pacey, film needs action, film needs, suspense. Film needs you to move the story along quickly, not with dialogue, but by showing it. Film needs spectacle. All of those are the tools of film. Those tools, when you bring it to a book written, should enhance the story. They should not compete with the story, but they enhance it. So we also have to have an author, which is why what we're going to talk about next, which is actually the chain of titles and the contracts and all of that, needs to be particularly a phase that you pay attention to. Because without the creative liberty and the creative freedom for a filmmaker to do what filmmaking offers that story, will end up basically just doing a video coverage of the book. And when the book has a lot of passions behind it, it becomes even more difficult. So that to me is very important. Decide what must stay, what must go. Secondly, you maintain the spirit of the book, but the details itself can shift. So you have to decide what are those details. I also think structural changes are inevitable because while the book and the film have three arc, storytelling format, how you start and how you end in books is different from film. And because you also know you can spend 5-10 pages telling us about the inner thoughts of the character. We cannot film the inner thoughts. So we've got to figure out a way in film where those thoughts are either acted upon, made as a throwback in some form or a flashback, create scenes where other characters instigate him to tell them those thoughts. You simply have to have a way where the actual form, sort of bows to the format. But if you think about film as providing far many more opportunities, then you understand that it's an interpretation, not a translation. An interpretation means that this has a writer as an author. An interpretation means that this has a director as a storyteller. Now, he has simply taken this story and is going to build on it and turn it into something far more visual. I think every decision you make for the film must primarily serve the film. And that to me is very important. One of the things that I think we've said before in the Q&A of The Man Died is that when we were starting, several times, myself, the writer, the director Awam, even the lead actor Wale Ojo, tried to get Professor Soyinka to tell us how he views the film. And remarkably, at every turn, he not only shooted us away, he kept saying, no, I've written the book. This is your interpretation. And what I got from that is a single book can end up with 7 different films interpreted. from the book. Lord of the Rings is far more. I read the book before the film, but I promise you, the film made me want to read the follow-up books because I was more interested in what he was going to do with it from what she was writing. So building that world, for instance, it was the film that defined how we started to think of that world. And I think that's really the magic. It seemed to me like almost a perfect collaboration. Now, for Nigeria, I feel we have a lot of really beautiful directors. We're beginning to create a generation of amazing directors. And one of the things that tapping into our literature will do for us is that it's going to take the level of difficulty, it's going to challenge them, it's going to inspire them, and it's going to bring their artistry more to account.
Yeah.
It's going to actually bring it to, there's going to be far more accountability to the creative choices that they are making, because now they will also understand the skill set that I think allows them to also think more collaboratively than when they're doing stuff that they originally created themselves.
Got you. So you've touched on the legal, which I want to dive into, but I want to also touch on this question that Ajike has also posted, which is how do you create suspense and avoid predictability when the audience already knows the book? So like, yeah.
Okay, I think it's a great question, but I tell you something, that's really what makes the film great, because even if they already know what happens, they have not yet felt it. Remember, the tools of the filmmaker includes the score, the music score, includes our capacity in editing to delay reality, to suspend the flow of time. We can shuffle things around. We can create imagery that is more avant-garde. There's just so much that we have in our toolbox to make that what the reader already knows, to make it an experience. I think that's really what's magical about that collaboration, is that the reason the readers of the book think they're coming to watch the film usually is often they think they've come in to mark your exam sheet. They think they're coming to sort of like validate what they know. But the success is that they don't know that you have all these powerful tools in your toolbox to shift their understanding of the book, to recreate things that they had to imagine, but more than anything else, to take control of their faculties, their senses. The only thing we cannot do is make them smell the space, but we definitely can do many things with the sound, with the editing, with effects, that makes it something that they live in with a little more impact than what was read in the book. If you've watched Lord of the Rings, if you've watched, The Godfather, you understand exactly what I'm saying. A lot of those things that were the turning points, when you read it in the book, is very tepid in impact. But look at the killing of the Godfather, and how the filmmaker uses motifs like the oranges. Most people don't realize it until later, that every time you see an orange in The Godfather, someone is about to die. And he started that from The Godfather, the assassination attempt on The Godfather. He went to buy oranges on his way home. And that's become a motif throughout Godfather 1 to 3 to 4. Each time you see oranges, someone is going to be killed. Now, was that part of the book? No. But has it become almost a cult thing? Yes. That's why many people have watched the Godfather film more times than they read the book. So the book is a starter, but the adaptation is an elevation. The adaptation is an experience. The adaptation also, I think, serves the writer because it suggests to the writer many themes that allows for a follow-up. Because essentially speaking, those characters are the IP rights of that writer. And I think a lot of books that would not have had a second version or a third version became that because the film was made. What's his name? James Bond. James Bond was barely 100 pages of a book that's become one of the highest grossing franchises the world has ever seen. That's because of the film. So for us, we cannot have a Nollywood and have this beautiful, rich literary heritage and library and not figure out a way to build a bridge to connect them. Because what would be wonderful is for us to begin to think of creating folk heroes. There's a lot of folk heroes in cinema today that were created from books. I mean, James Bond is one of those, you know? So I just think when I started out by saying that it's about expanding the creative economy, that's what I mean. Because effectively, stand now that each film of James Bond, you know, costs 200, 300, 500 million dollars to make, and what it brings to the economy of wherever they're shooting is just hundreds of millions. And then when you look at what the actors who become James Bond, this personifies their career entirely. And they become, you know, incredibly wealthy. But it's also something from a book that's become global.
Yeah.
Every country in the world, everyone knows James Bond. But it started from a 100-page plus novel.
Yeah. So I guess because you've talked about how our literary space and our film space, they really need to merge. Ogochukwu wants to know, is asking that, how can we help those two communities see one another as one? How do we bring those two spaces together? I mean, obviously this platform right now is doing that, but how else can we expand it beyond this platform and really cultivate that?
People have to see the opportunity. That's why iREP is doing this. One of the things I find in Nigeria is if something succeeds and it makes money, you don't have to talk for very long. Nigeria is aligned. In fact, before you finish, we are moving there already. We're moving. I really think the most important thing is to articulate why this is a plus, why this is it's not just about being cerebral, it's also about the economy itself. Yeah. It's also a skill set that I think young people can focus on and develop. We have a lot of brilliant young writers who are writing books. We need to embrace them in the film industry, because the truth is there are many people in the film industry writing screenplays that are not quite cooked. They simply either not gifted or become formulaic. And I feel like after 30 years of Nollywood, we've also come to a place where we're beginning to repeat ourselves, in all honesty. And I think that, you know, the literary sector, not just old novels, there are new novels. That's why we came to Kuramo. That's why we go to the Lagos Book Festival of Kora. We've shown the film at both festivals on purpose, is to also interest those who are on that side in understanding that their book is also a bigger, a more interesting candidate for adaptation if they also try to write more visually, less about, you know, what the character said and what the character thought, to what is the character doing, because in film, we rely on actions, not words. We rely on subliminalities. We rely on context and words. We rely on descriptions, the mise en scene, what is in that frame. All of that is how we speak. And so in doing this, we're hoping that that collaboration is ignited, one, by the understanding that it's economically attractive and viable, but secondly, it's a new skill set that requires collaboration from both sides. But thirdly, it can help those who are writing books to sort of, adapt to writing film, screenplays, so that they also have another source of income. I don't see us succeeding as a creative industry if we are working in silos. Those who are writing theater should also understand that theater plays can be adapted to film. Theater plays can be taken off the dimensionality of stage, the flatness of the backdrop can be actually dropped into spaces and made as film, but it has to be rewritten for that format. So for me, that's what it is. It's the most collaborative
process
opportunity that I think, I hope all of us don't need too much marketing to understand and leverage.
Thank you for that. But I want to take us back to the understanding the adaptation process. And when you're taking a book that has been a book that is popular or that was written by popular or a popular character like Professor Soyinka, do you cater to the people that have read the book, or are you catering to the new audience that you are trying to bring? As in, how do you decide which audience you want to pull in? As in, who are you creating for?
Well, I think principally you're creating for a film audience. That to me is clear. You constantly must understand what are the expectations of the film audience. Which then means there are scenes inside The Man Died that are not in the book, that were created. The opening scene of W.S. hunting in the forest is not necessarily in the book. It's a scene that we've created because that scene at the beginning has a bit of suspense, a bit of spectacle. It's in the middle of the night. He is alone in a forest. He is hunting. All of that scene is more or less a metaphor for his personality. He is not a man afraid of the dark. He is brave. He is also not a prey. He's a hunter. He is a guy who is ready for the fight. And he does it at the time of his own choosing. If you ask me, that's who he is. And so we hope that in that first 2 minutes of hunting, while the credits go, you see something deep inside of him that says, more or less, another person is called Deborah Owu, but this man too is more or less that. I mean, they come from a generation that is filled with courage, filled with assertion. They do not fear a fight. That's what that scene was about.
Okay.
But that's had to be created by a screenwriter. And so it's very important. I'm glad that Bode Ashinyobi, who is a screenwriter for The Man Died, I'm glad that he will be speaking at this session tomorrow. And I hope that everyone is excited to listen to him. He's a magnificent mind. He's a young writer, but he's a writer with depth. He has studied Soyinka over years. He understood not just the text of the one book, but he understood where Soyinka comes from, whether it be prose or poetry. And it is from that depth of research, that knowing of that character, that is constructed this. So in writing it, he is not writing for Soyinka's readers. He's writing to transport them to join a new army of of viewers. And I think you see Bode, I mean, I consider Bode one of the greatest writers our industry's created, and I'm really blessed that we're friends. But to have collaborated with him was intentional. You have to not just have someone who pours out, you know, the book page by page, because then it's not going to actually even flow filmically. But he didn't do that alone. He worked with the director from day one. The writing of The Man Died, the adaptation, took 6 months, 6 months of constant meetings on Saturdays and Sundays. The director, the associate producers, myself, Bode, and for me, just those conversations, and again, it's important to say this about the director of The Man Died, Professor Awam Ankpam. Awam and Professor Wole Soyinka have a 40-year history. They know each other. Awam is also a professor of theater and performance. So, in a way, both the director and the writer, the screenwriter, did not only know the subject of the book, they knew the subject of the book. So there are bits and pieces of him that is then created. The dynamics of his relationship with his friends, like, you know, Johnson, people like Uncle, what's his name, Bolage, that dynamic was important to be explored. The Mbari Club is a dynamic that needed to be explored. His relationship with the pirates and needed to be explored. All of that is what makes who he is, and it is who he is that then explains his courage, his capacities, his inclination to intervene in a civil war, and his acquiescence, his serenity in prison, his capacity not lose his mind despite everything that was done. So I do think, yes, you have to make a film for a film audience, because that's the language of that format. But collaborating with the author is a very good idea, because there are many things in terms of subliminalities that may also have been left out of the book. But understand that the film is a characters format, and this person has created those characters, and your conversations has to be, who are these people? Why do they do what they do? So that you yourself understand what are the limits to which you can stretch them in the screenwriting. But you have to have a screenwriter who is writing visually.
Got you. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the rights and the legal considerations for book adaptations. So what were the key considerations, or what are key considerations when negotiating adaptation rights?
Well, I think you have to understand the chain of titles. The author has rights, the publisher has rights. Sometimes the publisher's rights are located in a territory, and there might be other contracts and other rights that have been licensed in other places. It depends also on the type of book it is. If it's a memoir, yes, there are also historical accounts that you may need to research before you decide that this person's account is the only account, or is the real account, or is the true account. But IP with the author is a primary. The author's IP is a primary contract to be licensed. There are standard fees depending on the publisher, depending on the book, depending on the type of contract the publisher and the writer also have. If the publisher have been given the rights to leverage the story on different formats may not be spelled out, but that may cover things like, online stuff. You may cover animation and cartooning. You may cover reading, audio books. It may cover territories. There's just so many details that you need to absolutely have ticked off with the author, with the author's representatives, if the author has one, the legal representation of the author has to be engaged vibrantly, because time is a very important thing in how long also in which you are going to have opportunity to make the film. Because film, I may have the license to make a story, but I don't yet have the budget to make the film. There are many times people have bought the rights to a book, the rights to a story, and the author thinks that once they've been paid, they're expecting the film to be made the next month. But producers will buy rights so that they can go shopping it. And sometimes the shopping rights itself needs to be embedded in your understanding of your agreement with the author, with the author's publisher, with the author's people. The shopping rights agreement says, I have 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years to shop this story around. That's very important, because sometimes you do have the rights to the story, but the budget for the film is not coming. Sometimes you assume that a streamer, a distributor, or whatever might like the story, and it doesn't turn out that way. But you've already paid, or you've already got the agreement here. Now, sometimes the agreement with the author or with the publisher or whatever is cash-based. Sometimes it is percentage-based. It depends on, what they are asking and how they see it. Now, if you're an author and, a filmmaker from the next door wants to make your film, your negotiation is different than if Kunle Afolayan says, I want to make your story. It's different, because you have to decide, what do I want? So if a Kunle Afolayan comes and says, I want to make your story, but I don't have money to pay for the rights now, it will be smart for you to give it to him anyway, because he is more likely to get the money to make the film. He's more likely to make a bigger film. And guess what? He has a reputation to protect. So it's unlikely that he is going to make a film that does not have what I call the best hair. Okay? Now, if a corner-side filmmaker comes and wants to make your story, you also have to decide how much creative intrusion, oversight do you wish to have. It is better not to give the rights at all if you're unsure of the capacity or the creative abilities of the producer that is coming. So it's always important, regardless of what money is on the table, to think of the antecedents of the producer. Because to make a film as a producer is hard enough. To make an adaptation is 20 times hard. Why? Because there's so many different voices. And you have to be able to convince those voices that the end product will be worth their expectations. And to me, I think that's where it's at. So there has to be a conversation where the filmmaker is not just coming to say, give me the story. The filmmaker must come with a vision of the story. What kind of story do I want to make out of this, your story? A vision is important. Enthusiasm is very important, because I think an author wants to know that you love the story and the why you love the story. But you also have to sell to the author the idea that making it into a film widens the author's audience. Their footprints become larger, more global. And if you're able to do that, they benefit immensely, much more than money can bring. Now, all of that needs to be embedded in a contract. The contract has to be balanced. Weighted is the way I say it. It has to protect the producer from losing money in the event that, making the film is becoming something that the timing is not predictable, or the budget is so big that they need to put together a coalition or a lot of money to make it happen. So the time to do that is part of the protection a producer needs to have in that contract. But the second thing is which is really the big thing, is creative control. The writer cannot have creative control. And that's very important. A lot of writers think that automatically they're going to write the film. It's not automatic, and it may not even be in your own best interest, because those who write for film have a formula and a way of thinking and a way of writing. That's why sometimes they too are unable to write novels. So it's sort of vital that creative control is vested in the producer, but the producer must employ the author as a consultant to the screenwriter. It is in bringing these two people together that you really can have, because then the screenwriter can ask the author, what were you thinking when you did this? Or what were you thinking, is this necessary? Is it not necessary? That to me is the best case scenario. But all of that needs to be in that agreement and that contract. The roles of the writer in the scheme of this production is key. If there is a licensing fee, it's also can be different from things like if we start to sell stuff. What's that thing? We commercialize
merchandise?
Phrases from. We start to merchandise bits and pieces of the story. For instance, the merchandising of James Bond brings in more money per year than the films do, and it's all year round. The author is the creator of the character. So there has to be a negotiation and a percentage of the merchandising that goes to that originator of the character and story as part of their IP. That's why it's important that the writer is not just thinking of the story. It has to, of the story now. You have to think about the story when it has succeeded. So the contract has to be created as a very optimistic view of what happens when the story has been made into film, when it travels abroad and we're now earning in dollars. What is the residual to the originator of the story? What is the licensing regime? How does it change? For the producer, part of his protection as well is to ensure that no part of that story becomes licensed to a second person who releases stuff that undermines the capacity of the producer to monetize that original license. By that, I mean, if you give me a license to make the film, and I've got 3 years of a shopping agreement to find the money to make a film, you cannot, in the span of 3 years, suddenly go and give rights to somebody to go and make a YouTube film of the same story, or to take the same character and make a YouTube thing, and suddenly everybody sort of seen that, and it's more difficult for me to get the budget to make a bigger thing. It's certainly more difficult, even if I have the budget already, to drag people there, because now there's confusion about the two titles and what they are. So there has to be protection within that for both sides, for the producer, for the, what I will call the bits and pieces that are the challenges of finding the money, putting the crew together, and the time it takes to actually make a film and get it ready for distribution. All of that has to be captured. And of course, the expectations of the author, the publisher, have to be stated clearly so that the film moves, whatever is there, residuals come to them. I think that's very important as number one. Number two is within the production itself. One of the bigger dangers is that when you do adaptations and the book was popular beforehand, the character that plays the lead can become the face of that character, right? As in, if I play James Bond, I mean, it's very difficult now to imagine another Godfather 1 without Marlon Brando. Al Pacino defined what Godfather's, the subsequent Godfather, what it looks like. But if Al Pacino starts selling T-shirts with his own face on it, dressed in the costume of the Godfather, he doesn't write anything on it, but he doesn't put that R registered on it. If he does not have a contract that stops him, he can actually leverage it. You may sue him, may make your arguments and win, but it's important that the IP of this writer and the rights that have been given to the production are also protected by contracts within the production. So that, at the end of the day, if I start making coffee mugs that says, the man died, and we had proposals, for instance, where we're going to do merchandising. I love coffee, and I was going to make coffee mugs with Wole Soyinka's face on it from the film, and I was just going to say, "Who shook the job?" and put it on it. Now, there were backup arguments within our team. Did we have a contract that covered that? Will his face on the mug be part of what he gave us as license? We haven't made those mugs till now, and I mean, between you and I, I'm drinking coffee with my bare hands until we make those mugs. But we're looking at the legals of that before we make it. But the key is to make sure that the licensing, there is a residual, not just from the film, but if you make merchandising, you make T-shirts, you make mugs, you make whatever, the selling based on the characters created here or by the author, that there is money going back that says, and that also has to be in the contract beforehand. Now, why are all these contracts important? The chain of titles is what a distributor is looking for, especially when there's a book, because guess who will sue the distributor and the cinema house and all those who push the film? It will be the estate of the owners of the IP. So you can't even get to distribution unless the owner of the IP has given you some contract, some chain of title document that allows you to be able to actually put that together with all your other documents for distribution. That's, once again, the long answer to a very short question.
We appreciate the long answer because it helps cut out some of my questions, but it also helps to ginger our audience with their questions. So I have a question from Otiga. And Otiga is asking, will you say the cost of complexity of securing rights for a story is a major impediment to getting more of these kind of works made? Is it generally cheaper to shy away from adaptations?
Well, when I started, good question, but what I started with was a hopeful message about how much more money can be made. It's always important to think of expanding the pot of gold rather than worrying about how dirty our hands will be to get the gold out. I think for me, we have right now in our industry a large army of entertainment lawyers. We were very lucky because that's growing. It's growing because a lot of lawyers are beginning to see the opportunities that exist in the creative industry, and there are now like a large army of them constantly. They need the work, and we need them. And for me, a film industry can't just be about those who make film. It always has to be those who are able to make meaning out of how we make film. And if that economy is going to sustain, we have to constantly look at how to make the pot bigger. We can't stay with with just what satisfies us as filmmakers. We also have to create bigger and bigger projects that spread clear across. I'm still looking for us to start creating fashion lines out of clothing that came from a film or a production. When I did Battleground, a lot of the clothes that Mrs. Badmoss was wearing became a line on its own, and it became a fashion thing. I was very pleased with that. There are those guys as well who are able to, I mean, people like Chike, who is a big music artist now, was an actor on Battleground. And those are the kind of things that can connect the different parts of the creative industries. We can't, like I said, imagine that we will stay in silos. But there is no part of making film that is not a headache now. So making a contract, you don't make a contract with a writer. You have to make the contract with the screenwriter. There's a contract with the actor. There's a contract with the DOP. There's a contract with the production company, with the distributor. All of filmmaking is a chain of titles. It's contracts.
Yeah.
So one more does not make a difference. And if that one more expands the pot, I would say, we go for it. Many of us hire actors who are incredibly difficult to manage. But because the actor delivers you a performance, because the actor brings you an audience, because you swallow your pride and go and look for ogbono for them to eat at 2 a.m. on set. It's the cost of what you're looking for.
I have another question from Ogochukwu, his question is asking if are writers open to making deals with up-and-coming filmmakers? Some filmmakers may not readily have money, but they may know how to get the work done. And so writers might be looking for, like the Kunle Afolayan of this world that would quickly take their book to the screen, as opposed to wanting to start out with a young up-and-coming filmmaker. So would you speak into that?
Well, I always say that Kunle Afolayan was once the up-and-coming. Nobody plucks, nobody climbs a tree from the top. He had to start from somewhere. And his success should inspire the up-and-coming. The up-and-coming cannot become competition for those that are meant to be their mentors. And a lot of my work with young people has to do with that. I have a large army of young people whose potential inspire me, because I know that they are far more creative than I was at their age. They certainly got more tools than I had at their age. Their possibilities are wider. And so it becomes almost a responsibility for me to plug the holes that they may fall into, so that the mistakes I made already in my journey, they do not have to make again. And they can make new mistakes, but at least they will be starting from a level higher than I did. That's how an industry rejuvenates itself. But it has to be from a place of collaboration, not competition. A lot of young filmmakers think that they are competition for the older ones or for the more successful ones. No, you're not. What stops you from pitching that story and talking to the older, more successful filmmaker to say, I love the story, I love to make it as a film, will you support me? So it's you and that older filmmaker that go to talk to the author. Because really, when you are talking to the author, if the author is going to make a neutral and unbiased assessment. You certainly don't have yet the filmography behind you. You don't have yet the audience. You don't have yet anything to prove that you will succeed apart from your words.
Yeah. And prayer.
And I always tell young people, don't assume that you are the only one who has the skill set for directing that no one has ever seen. In fact, when you think like that, you're most likely to fail. Because it means that your mindset about filmmaking is more of someone, of a tennis player. No, filmmaking is football. You actually need a team. You need a team. What makes a Korea for Lion is a team. He's got enough mind to put a team together. What makes Tunde Kelani is his team. Some of his team, I mean, but you have to get to that space where you are smart enough to find the right people and to build that team to mesh together.
Yeah.
And that's when you can speak for a team.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you find a book you like, yeah, have a chat with the author, find out if the author if the author sees the possibility of the book as a visual property. If they do, don't make a proposal there. Go and sit down and do a pitch document for that.
Yeah.
Go and make a case for why you think this will be a great film. Not just a great instrument of showcasing your own creativity. No, it's about building audiences, doing great work, and to do that, put a team together. Carry your pitch document to people whose voice might be weighty with the author. Sometimes the author is a young person as well. Sometimes the author is older. And once you take the steps in the interest of the project, not just about you and your skill sets, you'll be just fine. I'm so keen constantly to talk to young people about collaborations and building teams, and trying to make sure that you build teams, not people of the same mindset as you, but people whose skill sets complement yours.
Yeah.
And I think most people that succeed in our industry, if you look deeper into their setup, you'll see that they have quite a number of incredibly brilliant and deep collaborators who make their work shine. As you know, Demand Died is the best example of that. Our team is everybody's accomplished in their own way, and it is that capacity brought together that I think, for starters, convinced WS that there was a team here who could do this, and gave him peace. But it also ensured that everyone that was part of this had the responsibility to make Prof proud and to, So I that would be my answer.
Okay. Thank you. So I have another question from Eziene, and the question goes, so acquiring rights may be a challenge for many Nigerian filmmakers, especially young ones. What would be your advice to those who decide to look to open sources like folklore, myths, legends, to bring those to life? What are the pros, cons, or ethical issues with this?
Well, I don't think there's any folklore that does not have a source. When you say open source, you are saying that, okay, we are talking about the tortoise and it has gone through many iteration over time, and it's about public wisdom at the end of it. But those folklores, you have to supply a large portion of its details. And by the time you are done, it certainly may not be as recognizable to everybody else as you would have imagined. So for me, there's really no difficulty in adaptations if you're willing to make proposals that solve the challenges that you encounter. If you are trying to adapt a book and you don't have resources, Why are you not making a contract that offers a share of profit? Why not? Why are you not detailing the residuals that would come to the author that will cover the cost of licensing and whatever profit sharing they can get? Why are you not proposing that in the contract that you're offering? To simply offer nothing is certainly not a point. Now, when you do open source stuff like you think you're doing folklore emanates from a village somewhere. So certainly there is a culture, what I will call a general cultural ownership of a story, which might have been adapted to other cultures as well. But for you to actually ascribe it to an existing culture, you definitely owe that culture something. You can't imagine that you just say it and it's all free. I do think that once you start to name, so if it's an imaginary space, you have liberty to do that. And then you fill in all the stuff. But what you're creating is original. We're talking about adaptation because we're trying to migrate a pre-existing audience, a pre-existing successful novel, a pre-existing storyteller who has solved a lot of the technical narrative questions that we are simply adapting and doing differently. So for me, it's two different things. If you create an original from a folklore, you own the IP. You don't need to talk to anybody. But that's not what this is about. This is not about general writing. This is specific to adaptations. Yeah. And one of the first things I talked about is you only look at adapting a book that was successful. You don't adapt a book that nobody knows. You don't adapt a book that did not win something, because that's exactly what you're buying in the adaptation. Mm-hmm. So when you are doing adaptation, please go to the book festivals, go to Kuramo, look at the books they are giving awards to. Go to Lagos Book Festival. Look at the books they are giving awards to. There's a Rainbow Book Festival in Port Harcourt. Look at the books they are giving awards to. What that does to you is that those books are getting awarded because a panel of storytellers have interrogated them. And they are rich. They are rich in story, rich in characterization, rich in they're just ready. And if they also happen to have been a winner at the bookstore, or people recommend them highly, then you have something to propose adaptation for. You're not adapting just because it's a story. You're adapting because it is already a winning story. Yeah. It's the same thing with plays. There are plays that, were a total bust on stage. They're not likely to be winners in film. So if you do have a stage play written, you need to give it to a screenwriter, but that stage play needed to have won, needed to have a reputation, needed to, those are the kind of things that make this, as I started, about the creative economy.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I have a question from Leighton. Sir, within the context of this discussion, what legal rights are required for adapting books written by more than one authors about public events or historical figures? For example, in the case of a biopic on Kurumi Shango, considering multiple authors have written about them, who holds the authority to grant adaptation rights? If a producer intends to bring such a character to the screen, whom should they approach?
Well, if you're using your base source is someone's book about Shango, then you owe that person, because that person is already an IP owner. Shango is an idea. It's an idea. Shango is not folklore. Shango is an idea embedded in the spiritual etymology of a tribe. his heroic values is the same as if it is Obatala or any of these deities that we write about. You don't owe anybody if you use a deity and say you are going to. It's like saying Superman. Different people use Superman differently, but a studio has created a Superman that has a cape. You cannot use that Superman without paying them. So if you take Shango, for instance, and you turn Shango into a whimpering idiot, for instance, and he's not as strong or powerful and does not have thunder as his voice and all of that, that's your own creation, but you have also created an expectation because the Shango that is in the mind of people is differently constructed. Yeah. So when we're talking about what is open source, characterization, all of that, you can create whatever you want from the history of a people. You can decide that, okay, you want to reconstruct the killing of Muritala, but you have to say that it is not what happened, or this is your own rendition of what happened. As you know, there is a sort of like a mixing of formats now, because there's a lot of documentaries where there is a lot of recreation. There are a lot of documentaries now where, going back in the past, AI is being employed to recreate what happened using the facts and history of the time. So there is going to constantly be legal questions going forward about what is truth, what is fact, where do they meet, and how do we leverage all of that within the space of our imagination engineering. So I can't have an answer for you, but anything that you take derived from someone else's creative product, you certainly have to go back to them and negotiate rights.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that, sir. So I want to jump into casting and the considerations around that. So when you're working, so like in The Man Died, we have a larger than life personality like Professor Shoyinka. What were the unique challenges that came with finding the right character to play him? And you know, and some of the other characters that we had in the film, how was that? What was that process like? What were the qualities you were looking for?
Well, I think it was first and foremost, beyond the looks, Professor Wole Soyinka has a fairly distinctive gait. He has a certain carriage where even at 91, you can see that his shoulders are you know, standing up straight. Yeah. He comes from a generation where the way they articulated their words was very clear and very deliberate and very distinct, regardless of what language they were speaking. So for me, it was more about those values than whether the character we chose looked like him. Looking like him would be the easy option. He has a big mane of white hair. He has a, you know, you can, those for me is a cheap way to say this is Wole Soyinka. For me, it was more about his gait, his carriage, his presence, his speaking pattern, because he had a very distinct speaking pattern. And he is a poet, one who presented a lot. So articulation and words were very important. And you know that he has residues of having studied in England, but at the same time, there is a underlying bar sound that never away. His baritone is interesting. I think all of that was just the outside of the design. But the fact that his body language controlled his space was always, for me, to find an actor who could do all of that. Lucky for us, Wale is a magnificent actor, but he had played Wole Soyinka in many stage plays before. He was deeply into interpreting that character. He knew the man himself. And the very first time it was being put together, Wole Soyinka himself also said, you guys might want to think about Wale Ojo because he's seen him play him on stage. That was luck. Yeah. So we were very lucky in that Wale came in, brought his magic. He studied, he read, he could recite Wole Soyinka's poetry off his head. He was just an amazing tool. But the director was also someone who had intimately known Wole Soyinka for 40 years. So his body language was very familiar to the director. And so working between these two guys, I think we were lucky and blessed. And Wale, in my opinion, really came, he showed the discipline, the preparation, and the you know, the talent that I keep talking about. If any part of our industry has advanced the most, it's actually the actors. They've had the most practice. They really are really very good. We are behind in giving them the kind of material that I think can continue to challenge them, can push them to actually reach deeper, do more bigger things. If you look at someone like, you know, Wale, it was the material. You look at Joke Silva in Fumi Ransom Kuti. I mean, I finished watching that film, I immediately called her and say, yes. But that's material. That was always in her. It was just waiting for the material. And so our actors really can do a lot. In the midst of, in terms of casting, Wole Soyinka's friends in The Man Died, there was a dynamic between him and Johnson, Femi Johnson, and Bola Ige. They grew up together. They spent time together. They could complete each other's sentences. So we were not looking for people that look like them. We were looking for the chemistry. Could they create a believable, plausible chemistry that defined that friendship? Same thing with the character of, you know, Wole Soyinka's wife. You know, you needed a woman whose strength was right there in your face. Anyone that would marry Wole Soyinka anyway, you know, had to be entirely a person of agency, all on their own. And I'm really glad that we were able to get someone like Christina to do that. Segilola came to the party as well. We had some fantastic actors here, but Sam Dede as the security officer, as the antagonist, was just amazing. And I think a lot of the people that played the smaller roles really took their time to bring a lot to the table, even though it was the amount of time on screen might not have been long. You know, Edmond Anaibe, you know, Francis Onwuche, you know, late Segun Akpata, Steve, you know, there's just so many.
Cast. Yeah, it was a strong cast.
Yeah, but you know, we just didn't have a cast that were there for their name to be on the list. We had a cast that came to prove something. They had respect for the source material, and they understood the responsibility. But also, you know, you got to say there were guys who were among prisoners who were also, and you got to give credit to the director, because I think what Dr. Awam did is to create an atmosphere where co-creation was possible. An atmosphere where he invited each and every one of his actors to talk with him, to imagine their role, to bring to it the little bits and pieces that he then, like a choir master, like a maestro, could conduct Yeah, and I think that again that brings us to the issue of collaboration, that openness to allow others to share in the process, to share in the glory, but to understand that this was never in the first place about glorification. It was about ending up with the best work possible from the text.
Awesome. So I want to jump quickly into production design. We are like so close to time. But I want to touch on the production design and world building. So a majority of his internal dialogue was in a prison, and the memoirs were basically written, on his experiences there. How did you use production design and sound and all the toolkits, cinematography, all of that? How did you convey the weightiness of that prison experience? Was that challenging to do?
Well, I think you got to give the credit to Theo Lawson. Theo Lawson worked with John, and I think what they did was massive. The real problem is this was a period piece, and because it's a period piece, it meant that we have to try and recapture a world in the 60s, a world before the war. It meant that the buildings look a certain way, the clothing was a certain way, the hairstyles were a certain way.
Music.
City of Ibadan was a certain way. The roads, the cars was a certain way. I think that was the biggest challenge. But who better to have been given the task of confronting that than someone of Theo Lawson's pedigree and experience. He led a team that I thought did a magnificent job. The costumes, for instance, what the police looked like in 1960, what their hairstyles looked. I mean, this was a comprehensive immersion into space. And my job was to find the leader for that team. And then I think, we succeeded with Theo Lawson's work. We're very grateful for it. But most of the prisons had to be built. They were built in a studio. The reason for that is so that we have control. And because, again, the whole sort of like claustrophobic feel of that required that the actors will be given time to be able to emote, to come to the expressions that we needed them to give us. And that would have been difficult if we were trying to use an actual real prison. So for me, the challenge of production design was the biggest challenge of this. And I'm really grateful that the team came through, both in design. The University of Ibadan, we owe them a great big thanks. I make a joke that thankfully they seem to have preserved their buildings for the day that we were going to make this film, because a lot of the buildings are from way back in those days. Some of them still basically still look the same. They were the spaces that Wale Soyinka himself was in those days. But it also had things that we needed. The river that he went through, the forest was also already there. There were just so many things that we could do there. And it was an honor that they chose to give us permission to do all of that. The Biafra buildings were also from there. And we were just very lucky that we could stay there and do a lot. But the interiors for the prison, for the homes, all of that were created in a studio in Lagos. Also, the roads and the cars, they were found, by Theo Lawson and his team, and they brought them all to Ibadan for us to use. A lot of stories. I'm sure the director would love to tell someday about those old cars and the impossibility of getting some of them to actually work. But there was a lot of people that made this possible. especially, researching the resources that was needed.
So some of the constraints of filmmakers, producers is funding. How did that go? How were you able to pull? How did that go? Can you just put a touchlight there for us?
Well, I should have brought Awam onto this. The funding for this really basically came from the academic, the New York University. And you also have to understand that there are many, many places and sources for funding. There are pre-sales that people do with a book, with a streamer or with a broadcast organization, with sales agents. There are many people that actually will put money down. Institutions to put money down. NGOs do that as well. So I say all of that to say an educational institution putting a grant down to do such a translation or adaptation is also part of the landscape of possibilities. But in this instance, yes, the money came from the New York University, where Professor Awam is Dean of Studies. He's Dean. He's also head of Department of Creatives and Theater and Performance. And I might also add that Professor Soyinka is a university professor also at NYU. So in a manner of speaking, they had the inside track to this, and I think they rose up to the challenge to do this as a way to also immortalize his 90th birthday and immortalize this work. But that's where the funding came from, yes.
Okay. And then I want to touch a bit on the marketing of this book, of this film, but also on book adaptations and all, because they already come with one audience, the book audience, but now that you're coming into this film space, how did you leverage the legacy of Prof. Soyinka, The Man Died, the book, in marketing and positioning this film, particularly because the film also touches a new generation that have not really connected with Prof before. So how did you get young people in?
Like you said, design of its release had to have 2 or 3 pathways. You have to ask yourself who are Prof's main audience. Prof is first and foremost a university professor. He's created a lot of university professors. He has generations of students. The book has been part of literature books in many universities. You have many people who have done their own masters, their own doctorates, using the book as their source. So for me, his first audience is in the universities, because also the book itself is a record of history. Is also about his intervention from a university. So we were clear that there will be a university run where we actually, bring this into his space. It is also, he's also an author. So we know that first and foremost, a poet is a playwright. Book festivals were a very important place to go, because a lot of those who he has inspired. It was not a shock to me, for instance, when we came to when we showed it at Kuramo and there were 350 people in the hall. That to me is the natural space of the film, and the engagement was amazing. The third, obviously, for me, will be film festivals, which is why we're also taking the films on a festival run, because first and foremost, a lot of the young people that this film speaks to correct history, to also give insight to who he is, they are that festival. They are these festivals. It's also important at these festivals to be able to internationalize the footprint of the film. That's what the festival does. And that's what we're doing now. We've been roughly about 11, 12 film festivals. We have lined up another 6 or 7 in the summer in the US. Some of these festivals are very important spaces, not just to show the film, but to have a conversation about the meaning of the film. So the film is more an impact film than a commercial film. So for me, even if we were going to go taking it into a cinema, commercialize or monetize, I would be more interested in what is the structure of the publicity and promotion that drives people there. Yeah. And that for me wasn't quite clear. And so we've structured our distribution and touch points to be get into the festivals, get into the book events, get into the international space, and then maybe do the streamer, where, of course, we would have gathered enough steam, showcased enough across the world, have enough following, and hopefully, be able to then situate or be licensed on a streaming platform or a broadcast platform that then brings it to a bigger mass audience. That's what The Man Died. But there are many books that go straight to commercial. The Godfather was immediately commercial. What's this one now? Half of a Yellow Sun was immediately commercial. It was strictly commercial. It's a beautiful book, so it really can go commercial. There are many like that. That's been done. So it can be commercial, but we've chosen, given the nature of this, that it will be more along the lines that I've described.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Efo. I mean, we are now at our time and we really need to shut down now. This has been most insightful for me, and from the questions that we had, I believe that it's been insightful for our participants as well. So I wanted to close. I wanted to close with 2 things. So first off, what piece of advice will you give to producers and filmmakers who are looking to adapt books? I know you've shared a lot, but what would someone that's want to pick up their first adaptation, what would you say run with?
Well, find a story that moves you. I think that's always important. Find a story you find inspiring, you find interesting. I always tell filmmakers to trust their own gut instincts. You're going to need to find that story that moves you, because the journey of adaptation is not simple. It's not straightforward. It's about human beings. It's about managing people. It's about making sure that people also have a stake in it and somehow are inspired to help you bring that film to life. So I do think that's one. 2, find a story that's lends itself to an experience. The filmic form is not the same as the written form, and it has to be a way in which when you bring it to film, the interpretation is not so far away from its essence, but at the same time, it expands the experience so that people are not saying it's exactly the same thing. The worst thing that can happen to you is someone that watched the film, someone says to them, "Oh, you could have bought the book," and it would have been the same thing. No, it shouldn't be the same thing. It should be much bigger, deeper, stronger, and more impacting. I think those 2 things are the key, because if that energy is there, it means that you will have the energy to go through the tough times to get here. You'll have the team supporting you, and you'll have the support that you need to make sure that a quality output is the outcome in the end.
Thank you. Okay, so before my last question, Ajike just shared a last question on distribution and marketing. Should producers rethink the traditional process going to film festivals before the theatrical and streaming release because of piracy?
No, I think film festivals are not the place where piracy occurs so much anymore. The whole process of putting a film in a festival technology has sort of put guardrails into what can happen. If I give you a DCP, already I can embed in it, watermarks that tell me where it's going. Most festivals that are organized, are well organized enough. There are professionals that deal with the protection of films during festivals. There are what you call it now. There are contracts signed that ensure that the festival takes responsibility in the period of time for your film. But why do we go to festivals? We don't go to festivals to gain awards. We go to festivals to make sure that word of mouth promotion among professionals come to your film. If it's really good, other people will talk about it. We go to festivals so that sales agents and distributors, they all attend festivals and they're looking for the new big thing. And it's a nice place as well to see what other people are doing and compare your work to the work that other people are doing, so that you can also moderate your own expectation of what your film is supposed to be or do.
Yeah.
And for me, if you do that, festivals already have the actors there. They're promoting the film that they're in. It's a nice, wonderful come together. And it gives you prominence in your industry if your film is selected. The idea that you are going to a festival is not your choice. You can enter for 1,000 festivals on Film Freeway, and 1,000 festivals can reject you. So the idea that your film is selected in itself should give you a lot of hope and confidence and satisfaction that selectors and curators think there's something about your work that other professionals should see, because the films they select are also representations of the brand essence of their festival. So you should think of festivals as opportunities, because other curators of other festivals also go there. They might talk to you at the festival. There are many festivals we've been to that it is right there and then after the screening that some other festival people come from different countries and say, can you please send us a screener, and all of that. So that's what I would say. It's always nice to be commercially viable. If you're a filmmaker, please feel free to make commercial films, but also make films that give you a legacy. It's never too early to make films that actually give meaning to the work you're doing.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the very last question for today's session. Can you share one experience of this whole process of making The Man Died that would stay with you maybe forever, but has stayed with you and you think will stay with you? Just one moment in the whole process.
Frankly, I think it was a final scene. It was a final scene in the forest of Ibadan, University of Ibadan, and that scene. I mean, it was amazing to watch the director be on his feet for almost 6 hours. The crew be on their feet for that long. Everybody just really enthusiastic. The DOP, Agbo Kelly, was just amazing. And to see the kind of constant interest, even the writer, the screenwriter, Bode, who is in England, was constantly in touch to know where we were. Do we need him for anything? That amount of energy and enthusiasm gave me the impression that, we succeeded even if we don't make money. We all came to the table try and create something that I think was worthy of the man we were trying to honor. So yeah, that night, it was around 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. All of Ibadan was quiet, and my crew inside the forest were all screaming and yelling because we finally were done. Yeah, that was a really satisfying moment for all of us.
Awesome, awesome. It's great to hear that energy was sustained to the very end of production when everybody would have been fagged out and all. So, and that energy comes through on the screen. It was a good film to watch. It was a great conversation starter. And, people talking about the history, what was going on in that time and what they remembered and what they had heard. So it was a fantastic watch. If you haven't seen the film, I implore you, look out for it in any of the other festivals that it's going to be at. And thank you, FO. Thank you for sharing with us, for making time out for this. We're still going to have two other sessions this week. We have one with the scriptwriter tomorrow, and then we have another one with the cinematographer on Wednesday. I encourage you all to join us. We are going to share the recording, the link of this recording and the other recordings as well to everyone's email. So look out for that as well, so that you can rewatch and re-soak in everything that has been shared today. Thank you all very much for being with us. Again, remember, we have iREP opening from Thursday. So go to the Instagram page and the website to get a list of all the films that are going to be screening and be part of this exciting moment. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, FO. Thank you, iREP.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.